What if Qui-Gon killed Maul on Tatooine? What would happen then? We pick up this story right as Anakin and Qui-Gon are rushing back to Padme's Nubian while being chased by Maul. Let's begin. As Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin Skywalker sprinted across the scorching sands of Tatooine, the Jedi Master sensed a dark presence approaching rapidly. A sinister engine's growl grew louder behind them. Glancing back, Qui-Gon spotted a shadowy figure on a sleek speeder bike, his black metal glinting under the harsh light of Tatooine's twin suns. "Anakin, get down," Qui-Gon shouted, and the boy instantly dropped to the sand as a red lightsaber sliced through the air where he had been running moments before. The attacker leaped from the bike, landing softly on the sand. His face was a canvas of red and black tattoos, crowned with a ring of sharp horns. Yellow eyes, signifying his deep connection to the dark side, burned with hatred. "Go, find Obi-Wan," Qui-Gon commanded, igniting his emerald lightsaber. Anakin nodded frantically and dashed toward the Naboo starship. His heart pounded as he raced up the boarding ramp, nearly colliding with Captain Panaka at the entrance. "Master Qui-Gon asked for Obi-Wan," Anakin blurted out, breathless. Panaka's eyes widened. "Obi-Wan is right here," he replied, gesturing to the young Jedi who was already moving toward the exit. Without a word, Obi-Wan Kenobi ignited his sapphire blade and sprinted out to join his mentor. "Stay inside, kid," Panaka advised, placing a firm hand on Anakin's shoulder. Anakin moved toward the cockpit and looked through the viewport, eyes wide with both fear and awe. Outside, he saw Qui-Gon, locked in combat with the mysterious, horned attacker, wielding a twin-bladed crimson lightsaber. Captain Panaka joined him, concern for the two Jedi evident on his face. Recognizing the threat posed by this unknown warrior, Panaka made a quick decision. He retrieved a long-range blaster rifle from a Nubian storage compartment. He then moved to a vantage point near the ship's entrance ramp. Meanwhile, the duel intensified. The air crackled with energy as lightsabers clashed, green and blue blades weaving intricate patterns against the Sith's fiery red, sand whipping around them, stirred by their fierce movements. Panaka steadied himself, raising the rifle and peering through the scope. He tracked the swift movements of the combatants, waiting for an opportunity. Qui-Gon noticed Panaka aiming from the ship. Catching Obi-Wan's eye during a swift exchange, he subtly signaled to maneuver their opponent into a position where Panaka can get a clean shot while the Zabrak is focused on them. They began adjusting their tactics, coordinating their movements to draw the horned attacker away from the ship and into a wider expanse of sand. The Sith warrior sensed the shift in their strategy and intensified his assault, his red blade slicing through the air like a blur. The Jedi parried and countered, but the close proximity made it impossible for Panaka to get a clear shot. "We need to create some distance," Qui-Gon murmured between parries. Obi-Wan nodded, feinting a high strike while Qui-Gon went low. The Sith anticipated their moves, twisting masterfully to evade their coordinated attack. The combatants moved with incredible speed across the flat expanse, their footprints marking a chaotic pattern in the sand. The Sith launched a fierce offensive, pushing the Jedi back toward the ship. "We must change the pace," Qui-Gon said to Obi-Wan. He took a deep breath, centering himself. They began to alternate their attacks, one pressing forward, while the other defended, attempting to disrupt the Sith's rhythm. The horned warrior scowled, his eyes twitching with irritation. Sensing an opportunity, Qui-Gon suddenly lunged forward with a powerful overhead strike. The Sith raised his saber to block, and their blades locked for a tense moment. Obi-Wan circled swiftly behind the Sith, forcing him to divide his attention. With the Sith momentarily off balance, Qui-Gon channeled the Force to deliver a strong push. The attacker was shoved several meters away, sliding across the sandy surface, where the Sith still stayed focused on the Jedi, but was left open to an attack by Panaka. Panaka steadied his aim, the Sith now isolated against the backdrop of the desert. He squeezed the trigger. The blaster bolt streaked toward the distracted Sith, who sensed it at the last instant. With a swift motion, he spun his lightsaber, deflecting the shot harmlessly into the sky. But the Zabrak was getting tired. His breathing grew heavier, a hint of frustration in his eyes. "He's weakening," Obi-Wan noted, regaining his stance. "Let's keep up the pressure," Qui-Gon urged. They advanced in unison, their lightsabers held ready. The Sith steadied himself, but the endless flat terrain offered no cover, nowhere to hide. Desperate, the Sith unleashed a wide arc of his saber, forcing the Jedi to leap back to avoid the deadly sweep. Seizing the moment, he gathered the Force and hurled a swirling cloud of sand into the air. A blinding dust storm enveloped the area, grains of sand whipping against their faces. Visibility dropped sharply. "Stay alert," Qui-Gon shouted over the howl of the sudden wind. All three combatants closed their eyes, relying on the Force to sense each other's movements. Qui-Gon felt the dark side pulsing from their opponent, a tempest of rage and determination. He moved cautiously, lightsaber held at the ready, attuned to the slightest disturbance in the Force. A sudden surge alerted him. The Sith lunged from the side, his red blade cutting through the veil of sand. Qui-Gon parried instinctively. Obi-Wan joined the fray, his blue blade adding another beacon in the swirling chaos. They fought in near darkness, the hum of lightsabers and the hiss of clashing energy, the only constants. The Sith was relentless, but the prolonged battle and the effort of maintaining the sandstorm were taking their toll. His attacks grew more aggressive, yet less controlled. Sensing his fatigue, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan pressed harder. The sand began to settle slightly, the winds losing some of their fury. Shadows became silhouettes as visibility improved incrementally. Seizing the moment, Qui-Gon feinted to the left. The Sith took the bait, turning to block what he thought was an incoming strike. Obi-Wan emerged from the haze on the opposite side, his blade slicing across the Sith's arm. A sharp cry escaped the attacker as he stumbled back, clutching the seared wound. Enraged, the Sith unleashed a wave of Force energy, pushing both Jedi back. The exertion drained him further, but the Jedi quickly regained their footing and rushed to end the battle. The Sith's eyes flashed with defiance. Gathering the remnants of his strength, he charged at Qui-Gon, his attacks wild yet powerful. Qui-Gon met each blow with the practiced ease of a Jedi master, his composure unshaken. Obi-Wan moved to flank him, the two Jedi synchronizing their movements. The Sith's strikes became erratic, his footing unsteady on the shifting sands. As the last gusts of the sandstorm subsided, the scene clarified. The sun broke through, illuminating the battleground. Grains of sand glistened like tiny jewels, and the three warriors stood amidst the vast desert expanse. Sensing the decisive moment, Qui-Gon deflected a heavy strike, redirecting the Sith's blade wide and leaving him exposed. In one fluid motion, he brought his lightsaber down. The green blade cut through the Sith's defenses. Striking true, the red-bladed weapon slipped from the attacker's grasp, extinguishing as it hit the ground. The Sith staggered, a mix of shock and disbelief etched across his tattooed face. He dropped to his knees, the weight of defeat bearing down. "It's over," Qui-Gon said softly, his gaze steady. The Sith looked up, eyes burning with a complex blend of hatred and self-loathing. Obi-Wan stepped forward, his expression a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Who are you?" Obi-Wan demanded. The Sith spat onto the sand, the act laden with contempt. Yet, the disgust seemed directed inward, a silent acknowledgement of his own failure. He whispered hoarsely, "I was not strong enough, but others will follow. Your time is at an end, Jedi." His head bowed, and he collapsed onto the sand, the life fading from his eyes. A silence settled over the desert plain. The winds had stilled, leaving an eerie calm in their wake. The Jedi stood for a moment, absorbing the gravity of what had transpired. Panaka approached cautiously, lowering his rifle. "Is he dead? Who was he asked, his voice breaking the quiet. Qui-Gon nodded solemnly. "Yes, but I sense this is only the beginning." "The Sith, they have returned," Obi-Wan replied, concern etched across his face. "We must inform the Council immediately," Qui-Gon affirmed. With Panaka's assistance, they carefully lifted the fallen Sith's body and carried it aboard the ship. The weight of their discovery and the weight of Maul's body, who was heavier than he looked, pressed heavily upon them. The reemergence of the Sith signaled a dark shift in the Force. As the ramp closed and the ship prepared for departure, Anakin approached Qui-Gon, his eyes filled with worry. "Master Qui-Gon, are you all right?" he asked softly. Qui-Gon offered a reassuring smile. "Yes, Anakin, we are unharmed," he replied. "Allow me to introduce you to my apprentice. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi." Obi-Wan extended a friendly hand. "It's good to meet you, Anakin," he said warmly. Anakin shook his hand eagerly. "Nice to meet you too, sir." The ship lifted off, leaving the sands of Tatooine behind. Upon arrival at the Ecumenopolis of Coruscant, the Jedi made their way to the temple. The grandeur of the towering spires and the serene ambience of the temple contrasted sharply with the turmoil they felt inside. Soon, Qui-Gon stood before the Jedi Council, the circle of masters regarding him with attentive eyes. Beside him, Obi-Wan stood stoically. "Report your findings, Master Qui-Gon," Mace Windu prompted. "We engaged a warrior on Tatooine," Qui-Gon began. "He was skilled in the Force and wielded a lightsaber with a red blade. We believe he was a Sith Lord." A murmur rippled through the council members. Ki-Adi-Mundi raised an eyebrow. "A Sith Lord? The Sith have been extinct for a millennium." Qui-Gon held up the lightsaber hilt he had brought. "We recovered his weapon. Examining the kyber crystal within will prove that it has been bled to form the Crimson Sith saber. Also, his body has been transported to the temple's medbay for examination. I believe the evidence will confirm our suspicions." The council exchanged grave looks. Yoda closed his eyes briefly, reaching out with the Force. "Clouded, the dark side has made things," he said softly. Mace Windu's expression was contemplative. "If the Sith have indeed returned, we must be cautious. Their presence could signal a threat we haven't faced in a millennium." The council deliberated further, acknowledging that the evidence pointed toward the Sith's re-emergence. They decided to investigate the matter discreetly to avoid causing widespread alarm. After discussing the Sith threat, Qui Gon brought up the matter of Anakin. "Masters, there is another matter. On Tatooine, I encountered a boy named Anakin Skywalker. The Force is exceptionally strong with him. I believe he may be the chosen one prophesied to bring balance to the Force." The council discussed the matter of Anakin as well, and ultimately Mace Windu said the following: "Bring him before us then, Master Qui-Gon. We will test him." Meanwhile, elsewhere on Coruscant, Darth Sidious learned of Darth Maul's demise through Count Dooku, who was already in league with him at this time. Though surprised by the loss of his apprentice, Sidious and his master Darth Plagueis, who was alive and on Coruscant at this time, had anticipated the possibility of the Jedi identifying the Zabrak as a Sith. Their overarching plans remained unaffected, and they continued manipulating events behind the scenes. Well, Palpatine did. Plagueis only had a few hours left to live by this point. In the Senate, Padme Amidala grew frustrated with the bureaucratic delays. Following Senator Palpatine's counsel, she called for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, leading to Palpatine's nomination for the position. Realizing that the Senate would not act swiftly enough to save her people, Padme decided to return to Naboo to take matters into her own hands with the help of the Gungan army. During this interval, the Jedi Council assessed Anakin. Despite initial reservations due to his age and the fear they sensed in him, they agreed to consider his fate after the crisis on Naboo was resolved. Qui-Gon was permitted to bring the boy along, hoping the experience would be instructive. Soon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Qui-Gon, Padme, and her entourage were on their way to the lush world of Naboo. Upon arrival, Padme sought the assistance of the Gungans. She managed to convince Boss Nass to unite their forces against the Trade Federation, forging a crucial alliance. With the Federation's droid army distracted by the Gungan offensive, Padme, her close companions, and the Jedi made their way into Theed Palace to apprehend Viceroy Gunray and his right hand, Rune Hako. Without Darth Maul to hinder them, the Jedi were fully able to support Padme's mission. They moved swiftly through the palace's ornate corridors, their lightsabers deflecting blaster fire from battle droids. Reaching the throne room, they confronted Gunray and Hako, who were desperately trying to coordinate their failing defenses. Panic edged across the Neimoidians' faces as Padme and the Jedi entered. With their droid forces faltering and escape routes cut off, they had no choice but to surrender. With blasters aimed squarely at them, Viceroy Newt Gunray and Rune Hako raised their hands in surrender. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan exchanged a meaningful glance. The swift capture meant they had an opportunity, a chance to uncover the deeper machinations behind the invasion. As the Neimoidians were escorted to a secure holding cell within the palace, the sounds of celebration began to filter in from the streets below. The people of Naboo were reclaiming their city, the oppressive presence of the Trade Federation lifting like a heavy fog. And in the space above Naboo, Anakin Skywalker had aided the Naboo forces in destroying the Federation's droid control ship and was now making his way back down to Theed. Soon after, in the confines of a holding cell, Gunray paced anxiously, awaiting transport to Coruscant. Rune Hako sat silently, his head in his hands. The metallic clang of the door announced the arrival of the Jedi. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan entered, their expressions inscrutable. "Viceroy, we have questions that need answering," Qui-Gon began calmly. Gunray scoffed, attempting to muster defiance. "I have nothing to say to you." Obi-Wan stepped forward. "Your alliance with a Sith Lord is a matter of grave concern. Cooperation would be advisable." At the mention of the Sith, a flicker of fear crossed Gunray's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Qui-Gon met his gaze steadily. "We can protect you from him." Gunray hesitated. "From who?" the Viceroy asked. "The one who orchestrated this invasion," Qui-Gon pressed. "The one who abandoned you at your moment of defeat." The Neimoidian's eyes shifted, betraying his anxiety, but he said nothing. "Without your testimony, the Senate will show no leniency. Tell us what you know," Qui-Gon said. Gunray remained silent, his fingers twitching nervously. Sensing his reluctance, Qui-Gon subtly reached out with the Force, applying gentle persuasion. "Help us understand, Viceroy. Who is this Sith Lord?" The Force suggestion eased past Gunray's mental defenses. His shoulders slumped. He calls himself Darth Sidious. He promised us support in the Senate, protection for our trade routes. We simply followed his orders. We only want peace." Obi-Wan exchanged a sharp glance with Qui-Gon. "And the warrior we faced on Tatooine, a Zabrak, he was aligned with Sidious?" Qui-Gon asked. Gunray nodded slowly. "Yes, Darth Maul, his apprentice," Gunray answered. "Why Naboo?" Qui-Gon asked. "What was the purpose of this invasion?" "It was a means to an end," Gunray admitted. "Sidious wanted to create a crisis, to force changes in the Senate. We were pawns. Realization dawned on Qui-Gon. The Sith have been manipulating events right under our noses, he said to Obi-Wan. At that moment, personnel arrived to transport the two Neimoidians, and they were swiftly taken away in cuffs. As they left the cell, Obi-Wan spoke quietly. Master, this confirms our worst fears. Indeed, Qui-Gon agreed. The Sith have returned, and they've managed to orchestrate a significant political upheaval without Jedi detection. A short while later, back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council convened to discuss the new revelations. Mace Windu's voice was measured but concerned. The information extracted from Viceroy Gunray confirms that the Sith have been manipulating the Trade Federation, Mace said. Ki-Adi-Mundi shook his head in disbelief. Yoda's eyes were heavy with contemplation. Blind we have been, for too long. Overconfidence, perhaps, in our ability to sense the dark side. There was silence for a long moment, which was broken by Qui-Gon Jinn. Masters, I believe part of the reason we failed to detect their influence is due to our diminished focus on certain aspects of the Force. The Sith have exploited gaps in our vigilance. I believe we must work to rectify this immediately. Mace raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting, Qui-Gon? Qui-Gon looked around the council chamber before speaking. The Jedi Order has long emphasized the roles of guardians and consulars, but we've neglected the Sentinels, who engage directly with the nuances of the galaxy's workings. I believe this error is what has allowed the Sith threat to grow this large, Qui-Gon said. So quick side note, the Sentinel class of Jedi, among other things, performed covert intelligence gathering operations across the galaxy. These specialized Jedi acted as the Order's secret eyes and ears, infiltrating criminal organizations, tracking suspicious financial transactions, and maintaining networks of informants in the galaxy's shadowy underworld. Unlike their more visible counterparts, Sentinels often worked without lightsabers drawn, preferring stealth, disguise, and careful manipulation of both technology and the Force to accomplish their missions. They were experts in slicing, mechanical engineering, and gathering intelligence, skills that proved invaluable in uncovering hidden threats to the Republic. Many combined their Force abilities with advanced technical knowledge, allowing them to bypass security systems or extract information from computer networks while remaining undetected. Plo Koon's mechanical voice added depth to the silence. You propose a focus to the practices of the Sentinels and Shadows? He asked. Jedi Shadows being a branch of the Jedi Sentinel class, who specialized in dealing with the threats posed by the dark side by whatever means necessary. Yes, Qui-Gon affirmed. We need Jedi who are adept at uncovering hidden threats, who combine the strengths of all paths. This oversight may have allowed the Sith to grow unchecked. They have changed their tactics. We must evolve as well, Masters. Yoda nodded slowly. Wise, this is. Adapt, we must. In the decade following the Naboo crisis, profound changes rippled through the Jedi Order. Palpatine ascended to the Chancellorship as predicted, while Obi-Wan earned his knighthood in recognition of his valor during the conflict. And Qui-Gon took young Anakin as his Padawan, but their path diverged from traditional training, Qui-Gon choosing to train Anakin as a Sentinel in light of his aptitude. The temple's ancient halls witnessed a renaissance of many arts, none more crucial than Force concealment. This fundamental technique, mastered through rigorous training, became the cornerstone of the Order's new Shadow War. In secured chambers deep within the temple, Jedi learned to suppress their Force presence, becoming virtually undetectable to even the most sensitive Force users. A tactic useful for Sentinels, as avoiding Sith detection, was presumed key during this time. Training grounds transformed to accommodate this new doctrine. Meditation chambers became testing grounds where Jedi practiced maintaining their diminished presence while performing complex tasks. Combat arenas expanded to include urban warfare simulations, teaching knights to navigate Coruscant's concrete canyons while remaining invisible in the Force. Soon, the Jedi's influence spread like quantum particles through Coruscant's federal district, their presence so minute it registered as mere background noise in the Force. They placed their own as senatorial aides, archivists, and cultural attachés. Some posed as merchants in the diplomatic quarter, while others tended bars in exclusive lounges where politicians loosened their tongues. A few even joined the Coruscant Opera as performers, their Force signatures compressed to infinitesimal points. The Grand Republic Museum became an unexpected nexus of intelligence. Jedi archaeologists, their Force presence masked, hosted private exhibitions for the elite. Every conversation in those marble halls filtered back to the temple's analytical core. Meanwhile, Sentinels posing as maintenance workers in the Senate building maintained an intricate web of observation. These carefully placed observers wove together a tapestry of information. their molecular-level force presence allowing them to operate under the nose of even the most powerful Sith. They noted which senators frequented certain establishments, who met with whom in supposedly secret locations, and most importantly, who seemed to hold unusual sway over others. Chancellor Palpatine's inner circle remained frustratingly opaque. The man himself appeared to detect and avoid their subtle probes with an almost prescient ability, even when observers compressed their presence to near nothingness. His closest advisors maintained ironclad discipline in their communications, yet even these gaps in intelligence proved telling. In gaming halls and luxury spas, in art galleries and diplomatic receptions, the Jedi's hidden network flourished, gathering threads of information that alone meant little, but together formed patterns that hinted at deeper machinations. One day, almost 10 years after the invasion of Naboo, deep in the temple's secure briefing chambers, a select group of Jedi gathered to discuss the mounting evidence. Qui Gon sat with his former apprentice Obi-Wan and his current Padawan Anakin, now a young man whose training as a sentinel had kept him far from Coruscant's political sphere. Barriss Offee, one of the Order's most effective sentinel operatives on Coruscant, stood before a holographic display of interconnected events. Her perfectly crafted persona as a minor senatorial aide revealed nothing of her true nature. Even her distinctive Mirialan features were subtly altered through both cosmetic and force techniques, while the art of force concealment rendered her presence in the energy field virtually non-existent. The pattern becomes clearer with each passing month, she explained, gesturing to various nodes of data. Chancellor Palpatine's political victories defy statistical probability. Even with our resources, Barriss continued, monitoring the Chancellor's activities has proven challenging. Opposition to his initiatives dissolves in ways we cannot explain. Senators enter his office steadfast in their positions and leave changed. Their aides report personality shifts, memory gaps, sudden reversals of long-held convictions. Our monitoring of 500 Republica documented 17 instances last month alone. Barriss elaborated. Private meetings where opposing senators arrived with detailed arguments against the Chancellor's proposals, only to emerge as ardent supporters, their original talking points apparently forgotten. Obi-Wan stroked his beard, a habit picked up from his former master. "And the accidents you mentioned, Barriss?" Obi-Wan inquired. Too precise to be coincidence, Barriss highlighted a series of incidents. Senators who oppose Palpatine have a habit of getting into accidents or resigning. Representative Danu's family emergency arose moments before his scheduled speech opposing the Military Creation Act. Each setback to the Chancellor's agenda is followed by an unusually convenient mishap. Qui-Gon exchanged a knowing look with Anakin. Their recent mission, tracking shipping anomalies in the Outer Rim, suddenly carried new significance. They'd sensed echoes of dark side manipulation in the timing of certain pirate raids that aligned perfectly with Senate vote schedules. Master Nu's analysis suggests something more insidious than political maneuvering, Barriss added. The Force itself seems to bend around these events, creating blind spots in our surveillance. These blind spots, Barriss continued, her voice dropping lower, they're not just gaps in information. The Force itself warps, as if something is actively concealing events. At this point, Master Thom emerged from the shadows of the chamber, where he had been silently observing. The Chancellor's influence spreads like a virus through the Republic's highest echelons. Every decision, every coincidence, serves his accumulation of power. Or perhaps, Qui-Gon ventured, exchanging a knowing look with Thom, it serves someone else's. The two masters had worked closely since Thom had pushed for the creation of the new Sentinel Division a decade ago, with Qui-Gon being one of his strongest supporters on the Council. Thom, as Director of Sentinel Operations, had transformed the Order's approach to combating darkness. His insistence on reviving ancient techniques had met initial resistance, but Qui-Gon's backing and the growing shadow of the Sith had eventually swayed the Council. Anakin watched the exchange intently. His years spent training between Qui-Gon and Thom's division had taught him to appreciate their shared perspective on necessary compromises. While other Jedi questioned their methods, the results spoke for themselves. The Chancellor, Barriss spoke carefully, has either fallen under Sith influence, or is their willing puppet, Thom finished, nodding to Qui-Gon. Either way, traditional oversight has proven insufficient in his case. This requires a more direct approach, Barriss replied. We must deploy the shadows against him, Thom stated. The Sentinel Division was created for exactly this purpose, to walk the line between light and dark when necessity demands it. Master Windu leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? A full shadow operation. Off any record. No oversight except from this room. Thom said, we use whatever means necessary to extract the truth. memory probes, force techniques the Council normally forbids, psychological manipulation. The dark side must be rooted out, whatever the cost. Qui-Gon nodded solemnly. The time for half measures has passed, Qui-Gon said, looking at Anakin, who nodded in return. After a brief deliberation, the Council members present gave their tacit approval. The operation would be compartmentalized. Even most Sentinels would remain unaware. Only the Shadows, those Jedi trained specifically to combat dark-side corruption, would know the full scope. As the meeting concluded, Thom and Qui-Gon gathered their most trusted operatives. Their methods would be ruthless, their investigation thorough. The Chancellor's every moment would be scrutinized through means that walked a razor's edge between light and dark. They would employ every technique at their disposal, permitted or forbidden, to uncover the truth. In the months before the Military Creation Act vote, after a period of increasingly suspicious behavior from Chancellor Palpatine, which had drawn the Jedi Council's scrutiny, a small contingent of Jedi Masters arranged a private meeting. For months, they had observed subtle discrepancies in his decisions, noted how crises seemed to escalate after his diplomatic interventions, and detected occasional ripples in the Force around his office that shouldn't have been present in a non-Force sensitive. With the galaxy teetering on the brink of war, they could no longer afford to wait for absolute certainty. Masters Yoda, Qui-Gon, Windu, Anakin Skywalker, and some other Jedi approached Palpatine in his office, under the pretense of discussing the growing separatist crisis. Their true purpose was to conduct an analysis of Palpatine's mind, a subtle technique that would allow them to sense any darkness lurking beneath Palpatine's carefully maintained facade. It was a delicate practice, one that required multiple masters working in concert, their combined wisdom allowing them to perceive the true nature of one's Force presence. If their suspicions proved unfounded, a gentle suggestion through the Force would ensure Palpatine remembered nothing more than a routine political discussion about the separatist threat. The moment they began their careful examination, weaving their Force awareness around Palpatine's mind, the Chancellor's kindly demeanor vanished. The dark side erupted like a supernova, shattering windows and hurling furniture with devastating force. His lightsaber ignited with a crimson flash as he revealed his true nature. The battle was brutal and swift. Palpatine moved like living darkness, his mastery of the Force beyond anything they'd anticipated. Master Eth Koth fell first, bisected before he could raise his defense. Kit Fisto managed to land a glancing blow before Sidious's lightning reduced him to ash. But the Sith Lord had revealed himself to the very warriors who had spent years preparing for this confrontation. The remaining Jedi moved with fluid precision, their synchronized attacks forcing Sidious to divide his attention. Each strike and counter was calculated, born from centuries of preserved knowledge about Sith combat techniques. When Sidious attempted to flee, Anakin interceded with prescient speed. The young Jedi's blade found its mark, and the most powerful Sith Lord in generations fell, his head separated cleanly from his shoulders. The Jedi moved quickly to control the narrative. Evidence was planted, suggesting an attack by a rival Sith Lord, Palpatine's own red lightsaber, serving as proof of his secret identity. Without Sidious manipulating events from the shadows, Count Dooku's attempted secession lost momentum. Though he tried to press forward with the war by attacking Republic systems and orchestrating the discovery of the clone army, the lack of coordination within the Republic that Palpatine had orchestrated left the Separatists at a disadvantage. After several inconclusive battles, Dooku, perhaps recognizing the futility of his position without his master's support, agreed to peace negotiations. The resulting settlement left the galaxy divided, but stable. The Separatist systems remained independent, their grievances against Republic corruption legitimate even without Sith influence. The Jedi maintained vigilant watch over both governments, working to gradually reduce corruption and heal the rift. Anakin's role in ending the Sith threat earned him early knighthood. His relationship with Padme evolved naturally without Palpatine's poisonous influence. Years later, Master Qui-Gon watched with pride as Anakin took his place on the Jedi Council, having grown into a thoughtful and balanced leader. The prophecy of the Chosen One had been fulfilled not through raw power, but through patience, training, and the willingness to walk the shadows while remaining true to the light. The Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems maintained an uneasy peace, their relationship gradually improving through diplomatic efforts and trade agreements. Though the galaxy remained imperfect, it had avoided the catastrophic war that might have been, and the Jedi Order, tempered by its brush with darkness, emerged stronger and wiser for the experience.